Welcome back. We got a lot of different things going on this week, so let's just get to it. Just got the new engine for the rototiller for that guy up the street here. So we're going to put the new engine on this thing and fire it up. The only three things we have to do to get this off here is unhook the throttle cable, which is already unhooked. Then we have to get the pulley off and the bolts that hold the engine to the tiller itself. I'm going to have to heat this up as it's pretty much stuck in there. But we'll get the engine off and then we'll heat it up and pull that out. Alright, with the old engine out of the way and the frame cleaned up, we'll go ahead and set our new one in place. Now once we get the engine bolted down in place and the throttle cable put on the belt, we'll be ready to try this thing out. Alright, we're going to take the torch now and heat up this set screw, see if we can get it out of there. So now that I've got it loose, I'm going to get that out completely, and then I'm just going to let that shaft cool down a little bit before we try to take it off. New engine on it, the pulley's installed, fresh gas and oil in it. This will be the first run out of the box. Let's see if it'll start. Seems this rototiller had more going against it than just the engine. The engine runs great and the tines actually work, but the transmission is not engaging. It also has the wrong belt on it. This one's too long. So the engine has to come back off so I can split the case for the transmission and then we can find out why it won't move. Well, here it is all torn apart. I didn't have time to film it while I was doing it. I was just too busy trying to figure out how it came apart. Had to take the handles off, the shield off, one of the tines off, both wheels. It was pretty much a task. If anybody ever wants you to go into one of these and build one, I would highly recommend you just tell them to buy a new one. But tomorrow I'm going to clean up in here and find out why this transmission wasn't working. And once we get beyond the grease, we should be able to figure it out pretty easily. Here's what's left of the drivetrain for the actual wheels. The chain for the tines is in pretty good shape, so we're not worried about that. But that gear assembly right there is where that smaller chain goes. And that's why it wasn't moving forward or backward. This is the detent assembly for our rototiller. I took the assembly apart because it was dragging. I was having a hard time getting it to move in and out of the different gears. The way these work, it uses a spring against a check ball, which is part of the detent, that goes into each one of these grooves. So each one of these grooves represents, forward, reverse, neutral, and then driving the tines. The chain assembly had broken there, as you saw earlier. And so I'm taking this thing apart to see if I can get it cleaned up and make it actuate better, or if we're going to have to replace it, because ultimately this is what did that chain in. As I think I said earlier, Alejandro did a really good job of getting these things flattened down with the 40 grit. With the heavy primer that's put on it, we're blocking it now with 220. And these things are coming out really well. So I think with just a little bit of polyester fill and a couple of small spots, these things will be ready for a second coat of primer wet sand it, and paint. With the two small low areas filled, we can wipe this fender down, get it primed again, then we should be ready to wet sand both of them and get some paint on them. The hood and gas tank are off the OC3, so we can get a better look at what's going on here now. The carburetor definitely has some linkage issues we're going to need to resolve, but we're going to take it apart first and get it cleaned up. That's going to allow me better access to the distributor so we can try to get some fire to the machine. Once that's done, we'll go after the hydraulic system to make sure that all that works to make the blade operate. Alright, here's our carburetor. So we'll go and get this thing dismantled and get it cleaned up and put back together. Next, I'm going to pull the cap off the distributor and see if we can clean up the points and get some fire to the plugs. I've decided to pull the distributor out of it so I can set the points better and take a closer look at the shaft. I've got the rotor button pointing down at 6 o'clock, so when I put it back together, as long as I put it back that way, we'll have it at least set so it'll start. And we can worry about setting the timing later. To clean the points, I'm going to put some sandpaper between the contacts and slide it up and down. Doesn't take a lot of movement, just kind of go back and forth with it a little bit. Get them clean and flat. The pressure from the points being closed is enough to clean them up. And slide this in and out. They look pretty good. Do this one more time. Then we can set them, put the distributor back. The gap on our points was just a little too wide, so once I got them sanded, I have it set correctly now. What happens is every time the point's shut, that allows the coil to build up energy, and then when the point's open, that breaks the contact and then allows the coil to fire the plug. So if the points are open too long and too wide, that means the points are going to be shut too little, so that's going to allow the coil to build up less energy. So it's really important to make sure that gap is set correctly. I found out that the carburetor that was on the OC3, this Zenith, is the wrong one. So I've already ordered the Marble Shrebler and all the linkages and everything that was actually missing from it from Zimmerman's up in Pennsylvania. We should have that in a couple of days. And then we'll have the entire fuel system the way it's supposed to be. I'm feeding the carbs with an IV bottle so we can tune it better. Right now I've got it turned on. There's no leaks from the carbs, so let's see if this thing will fire up. Now I've got the bike running on the IV bottle, I'm going to check out this tank to make sure it's clean and also make sure that it's flowing gas through the petcock correctly. After getting the sediment bowl off, it looks really nice inside the petcock there, and the pre-filter looks really nice. But there is some rust and debris down inside of the separator here, so I want to get it cleaned out before we put it back together. Then, once I've finished tuning the bike, I get the tank back on it, take this thing for a ride. When I put gas in the tank, turn the valve on, it was only feeding through one of the outlets, so one of them was plugged here somewhere. So I pulled it apart. There was some debris in here. I needed to take it apart a little further to get it all cleaned out. I'm glad that happened because I didn't want to put the tank on it on a good running bike and then did develop problems, a day or two from now when some of the trash got into the carburetor. So it's a good idea to get all this stuff cleaned up now. After getting this completely apart, I think I'm going to go ahead and soak it overnight. Everything, the passages look pretty good, but I can't see every part of it, so I'm going to soak it and then we'll blow through it tomorrow and make sure everything's okay. So a bird built a nest on a box on my porch and got some eggs in there. Maybe we'll keep you posted on what happens with these. I'm back to work on my Goldwing carburetors. Got the third one just about completely done. As I was putting the bowl on it, one of the screws for the bowl kept spinning. The threads are messed up on the housing, so I'm going to get a thread repair kit for that tomorrow and we'll get that taken care of. Also on that engine and carburetor assembly that I bought out of Maryland that I told you about last week, I got one of the pucks out. I had to drill it though off of one side. And I'm going to get that pressed into the carburetor that was missing it, and then we'll be able to fill that hole, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that when I get to it. But anyway, I'm a lot closer now on getting the carburetors done for the Goldwing, and hopefully getting that thing fired up for you in the next week or two. Some of you may remember me purchasing this Clectrac K20 out of Kansas over this past Christmas break. We haven't talked about the reason why I needed this particular machine. We'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks. But right now, there's something I need to look at on this machine. The oil level indicator is broken and it is no longer available. So we're going to pull it out and see if it's something that we can't fix. Here's the gauge off the machine. You can actually see the needle is working. This unit here works very much like a sending unit in a fuel tank. It's just missing the float end of it, but that moving up and down allows the needle to move back and forth and tell us when it's empty and full. We may be able to make this thing function again. Here's a couple more machines that were pulled out of the vines. This is an old sickle bar mower. Ran really good before the vines took it over, so I'm sure it'll run again. And this beast here is very similar to the one you saw me plow my garden with some episodes back, except this one's a lot bigger. This machine, like most of them, were sold by Sears and Roebuck back in the day. I have to check the serial numbers to find out how old this one actually is, but the Wisconsin engine that's on it has long since been locked up. But the transmission assembly and everything that goes along with it is freed up and in working order. So by putting an engine on it, we could get it working again. But I'm not sure what we're going to do with it just yet. Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll get our Honda carburetors tuned and take it for a ride. See if we have any luck fixing our oil level indicator for the K20. And we'll see if we can get our OC3 started. See you next week.